Welcome to the first edition of the Red River Farm Network Reporter Roundtable. We're going to visit about some of the issues of the day, and this past week has been one that has been another busy one with what's going on in the world of agriculture. I'm Don Wick from the Red River Farm Network. Our entire team here, Randy Coonan, Kira Hart, and Megan Overby joining us as well. Let's start off by taking a look at markets. Randy, it has been a crazy week, a very volatile week in the marketplace.
Yeah, and a lot of that has to do, I think, with the expiration of that May contract. Today's the last trading day on those, or they actually go into delivery at this point. So the May futures long contracts had to be reported last night at the close of business day, and then now the July becomes the front month here come Monday morning. And we saw May beans rally from 1364 to 1608 here in probably less than about 2.5 weeks. And we ended up seeing a little bit of and this goes over to the corn market as well. We ended up seeing a little bit of a short squeeze where we've got traders that are short bought. They buy the short side of that position. So they have to, or they actually sell the contract first. So they have to buy those back. And then what happened was they got caught out of the money. So they end up losing some money on that. And once that happens, the market has a way of punishing those people pretty well. And I think that's what happened here. And that's why we saw the May contracts, both corn and beans, hold up while the new crop started heading lower, because they have to roll that May into either July or later on. And so the trade has a way of shaking those weaker positions out. And that's what I think what we saw here the last couple of days.
Well, and Randy, I know with the volatility that we've been seeing in the markets, it's a little overwhelming for folks if you follow on a day-to-day basis, but there are still high corn and soybean prices, but those corn prices, corn's trying to buy acres, and it sounds like they're winning.
Yeah, exactly. Those May corn futures rallied from anywhere from 533 roughly to about 720 here as of yesterday. So again, same thing going on there. Spring wheat's been kind of the one that's been kind of losing the acres. I have a feeling up in this area because of the rally in the corn market. Although you have to remember, there's a reason we're planting spring wheat up in North Dakota, and they just don't get the corn yields that you will get in the I states and further south. But for the most part, I think corn is going to be the winner here.
It's interesting. I spoke with Ben Peters from Advanced Trading just the other day, and just looking for some historical perspective. He looked back to 1971, 1972, when Russia came in and bought so much grain, the great grain robbery of 1973, actually. It's kind of a rare situation to see this big range that we have like right now between the May and the July contracts. Let's switch gears. We've all been talking to farmers this week. Everybody's finally been able to get back in the field and get some work done. We were able to get out and visit with some folks as well. What are you hearing as far as planting progress? How are things going?
Yeah, well, Don, go ahead, Megan.
Yep. Well, personally in our farm, we actually started planting this week along with a lot of the other farmers in this Griggs, Nelson County, Foster County area. Obviously a lot of those are going to be either field pea, spring wheat acres, some guys starting corn, but that's because they probably have a pretty sizable amount of corn acres on their farm. And soil conditions, though, less than ideal. I mean, they're just so dry. You're not getting probably the seed bed that you want to, but farmers are just planting that seed and hoping for rain because they have to start somewhere.
That's kind of what we heard too from Pioneer Field agronomist Christy Sundin. We were at Larimore this week during Crop Watch, and she's up in that kind of that Langdon area, or not quite up that far north, but she was talking from Larimore north and west, extremely dry conditions, and guys need to be careful, especially putting the small seeded crops in the canolas. There's making some recommendations that if you can't find moisture, don't put it in places. So it's extremely dry.
Well, and then you've got folks out in that Minot, North Dakota area, trying to get some things seeded. And they do have moisture if they were no-till, a little bit that they can kind of tap into. And we found that out yesterday in visiting with farmers up around Northwest North Dakota area. It all depends on what you've got happening on your farm. If you can get something seeded and how early you got it in and what it looks like. And then you've got folks in Northwest Minnesota who say it's really dry. they've gotten things seeded a little quicker than usual, but they really could use a rain.
Rain is the lack thereof seems to be the operative situation. We keep watching that drought monitor. Megan, you were reporting on that a bit this week. What did we see in the update on Thursday?
So I think the big number from that drought monitor came in North Dakota, where extreme drought conditions actually increased 7% over the last week. And that's even with a little moisture here and there. And then 82% of the state is in that category. 98% of North Dakota as a whole is in some form of drought. In South Dakota, those dry conditions remain more on the mixed side. There's actually a pocket in the east central part of the state that has sufficient moisture, according to that monitor. And then the majority of Minnesota as well, we're seeing sufficient moisture. But the exception comes in the southern, way far south part of the state. And then, of course, as we talked about, northwest Minnesota. And then I think really where we're starting to tell a story is on the livestock side of things. Usually guys out west are considering their pasture turnout times right now. They've already had some grass growth. We're seeing no grass growth virtually anywhere across the state. And so they are making those plans and probably making a new plan again at this point. NDSU Extension had a drought webinar yesterday, and Kevin Sedivec, who is the forage and rangeland specialist, threw out some pretty astonishing numbers. Back fall, they were predicting a 20 to 25% deduction in grass forage land production. Now they're throwing out the number of 30% reduction, even more than that. One thing he threw out there that I thought was interesting was obviously we haven't got any sort of average rainfall up to this point, especially on the western half of the state. And he actually said 10 plus inches of rain would be needed just in May alone to achieve normal to slightly below normal forage production. So things are getting real out there.
No doubt. Obviously, we're all paying attention to what's happening there. We keep folks up to date with our weather. Drew Lerner from World Weather Incorporated, we appreciate having his updates twice a day. We also are seeing activity in the state legislatures, whether it's St. Paul or Bismarck. They both have been busy. Let's start maybe in St. Paul. Kira, it seems like we're now into the kind of last 2 weeks of the session, if they at least wrap up on time.
Yeah, that's right, Don. So Minnesota lawmakers essentially have 2 weeks left in their session to work out some of these budget details. The constitutional adjournment day for Minnesota in their legislative session is Monday, May 17th. Now, conference committee work essentially begins on Monday for 10 budget bills, and most of the conference committees by this time have been named. We visited with Bruce Clavin, an ag lobbyist, this week covering Minnesota. He said there's a global agreement that needs to be met on some of these spending bills before committees can officially negotiate. For example, one of the differences between the Minnesota Omnibus Ag Finance Bill is that the House increases the gross sales fee on pesticide products, raising $2.2 million. Whatever happens there has to be resolved before spending numbers can be decided and they can move forward for those negotiations. And of course, there are other budgets being closely watched, the environmental budget, the tax budget, all of those things. And Clavin was telling me he thinks Minnesota's session could actually go beyond that May 17th date because of other things that are happening too, not just the budget, but Governor Walz's powers. We've seen a lot of talk about that in the last year or so. And then also deciding on what to do with this federal relief money. I know some states, even North Dakota too, are trying to figure out how they move forward with that. So still a few things to do and probably not a lot of time to get it done, essentially, at least in Minnesota.
And in North Dakota, the session came to an end early this morning, just about 12:30 or so this morning. And if you look back on this session, Megan, you've been doing some reporting on the session this week. It seems like a lot got done for agriculture.
I think so. There are two bills in particular that stick out in my mind. So I think it was Julie Ellingson of the Stockmen's Association coined it as a decades old debate. So Senate Bill 2144, which allows for electronic posting of private land. And this has actually failed the legislature several sessions, and I don't even know how many, but definitely several. And this bill also allows for law enforcement to have a range of options for trespassers, up from a non-criminal offense to a Class A misdemeanor. So it just gives them some more flexibility on that front. Another one that I talked with Greg Lardy of NDSU Extension yesterday about, Senate Bill 2020. We have not heard that Governor Burgum has signed this, and Lardy wasn't going to speculate, what that process would look like. But this essentially restores the governor's recommended cuts for NDSU Extension, the Research Extension Center Network, and the Northern Crops Institute. So all of their budgets, we were looking at a 15% cut when this session first started. And then also included in there are some initiatives related to livestock, farm safety, big data, soil health, those all come from actually SBAR's priority list.
Switching gears to a national front, President Biden had a address to Congress on his 99th day in office, and agriculture got a couple shout outs. One in particular, I don't think I've ever heard cover crops mentioned in a State of the Union address before, and that did. Biden also trying to hold China's feet to the fire and on some trade issues as well. Carol, what else has been happening on the DC front this week?
Well, Don, I think we probably could elaborate a little bit more on President Biden's announcement that he made. Was that on Wednesday, I suppose, where he made the appearance in front of the joint session of Congress for that update? He announced a $1.8 trillion American Families Plan. In that proposal, there are changes proposed to stepped up basis and higher capital gains taxes. The proposal calls for a provision allowing heirs to avoid paying taxes on inherited assets known as stepped up basis. USDA now emphasized the plan defers any tax liability on family farms as long as the farm remains family owned and operated. And if the heir sells the family farm, the first $2 million in gains tax is tax free. Now, it's a lot to take in from this week, and visited with National Association of Wheat Growers CEO Chandler Gould on Thursday. And then according to him, the Biden administration seems really adamant on making changes to stepped up basis. And if that happens, there could be some political ramifications of that. And also the changes in stepped up basis or the estate tax are possible anywhere the government is looking for pay fors. It's not just this American Families Plan where we could see potential tax implications on rural America and farmers. That includes other issues like infrastructure. He didn't really say climate, but I would watch that too, potentially. And speaking of climate and infrastructure, conversations continue in Washington, D.C. on those topics as well. It's been 100 days since President Biden's been in office. There's been many executive orders and legislative packages. And honestly, at times, it's hard to follow all of it because there is so much going on. Also, the Supreme Court earlier this week heard oral arguments from the EPA, biofuel industry groups, and oil refiners on the use of small refinery exemptions. Visiting with National Corn Growers Association CEO John Doggett, he said he's optimistic now moving forward, but says time will tell. It could take weeks for justices to come up with a decision on that. Another thing we probably should be watching that was very interesting to me, the Texas Ag Commissioner filed a complaint earlier this week against a socially disadvantaged farmer proposal included in the latest round of COVID relief from President Biden. That lawsuit argues USDA is actively and resentfully discriminating against Americans based on race. It's my understanding that this may not be the only litigation. So we're still looking into some of that, but just stay tuned. This could get really interesting really quick. Those are a few things that are just happening on the DC front.
No doubt. Randy, you pay attention to the weather. What's the outlook as we get into next week?
Dry. Yeah, matter of fact, we got a few showers this morning up in the very southeastern corner of Saskatchewan and into North Dakota, north and west of that Minot area, but very, very light. Last time I visited with some of the weather guys, it was just a matter of, we're going to get some rain. It's not going to be completely dry, but it's not going to help us any. It's going to be just too little, too late, I have a feeling.
Yeah, we just never got that soil recharge, that moisture recharge we
Exactly.
needed.
Yep,
Well,
exactly.
one final note, we are proud to add a new Red River Farm Network radio partner, a new affiliate to our mix. It is from Glenwood, Minnesota, KMGK 107.1 on your FM dial. It's always great to bring a new one into the fold that joins 20 other radio stations across Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota as we report agriculture's business. Guys, appreciate the chance to pick everybody's brain as we have a little roundtable discussion here today.
Very good. Thank you much.
Thanks. Have a great week.
That's our